Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday morning. Now, today we're going to be talking about language and terminology to build partnerships in family daycare. So one of the reasons why we talk about language and terminology is the premise of the National Quality Standards when it came in 1999, I think it was to have a shared language between all of us working in early childhood so that we could all have a shared understanding, all make sure that we're using consistent language, making sure that we're sending the right messages. So that's the premise that's one of the principles behind the National Quality Standard. So today we're going to be looking at shared language and what that looks like. And also this is an opportunity for many of you to build your language and terminology, which is often referred to as like your professional jargon. So we're going to talk about building your professional language skills, which will also help with your practice, believe it or not. So give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get started. So again, happy Saturday to you. So here we go. You should be able to see my screen from now. So we are going to be talking about language and terminology, and we're going to start embracing the language and terminology that's written in the national standards into our everyday speak. So this is a really good opportunity if you need to build your language skills, or if you feel that you haven't quite got that professional jargon down pat yet. This will give you an opportunity to practice those skills and build that ability to put that language into your everyday speak. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background about me. So I'm Jodie Signorino, and I've been in the education and care services sector now for over 35 years. So I work with approved providers and peak bodies. So I work at that stage. So all the information that I share with you here on the YouTube channel is targeted at family daycare educators, and this is an absolutely free resource for you. So I've worked 16 years in the governance and leadership space, and I've done that for a really long time, and I've specialised in family daycare for, I don't know, since 2014, so whatever that is. So as I said, I work with Ella and I work with Community Childcare Australia. So I work with the peak bodies to make sure that people have the resources and everything that they need to make sure that their services are operating within the national quality standards and beyond. I live in Melbourne, Victoria. I hold early childhood qualifications. I hold human services qualifications, and I'm currently part the way through my master's. And yeah, that's probably it about me. I am going to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And yeah, I think we should do that all the time. And I would like to acknowledge that the land that I deliver to you from today is Warrandingi land, and I would like to again say thank you. So also, don't forget to take this opportunity to subscribe to the YouTube channel, because there is free training every weekend for family daycare educators. So make sure you subscribe and put your notifications on. So today we are going to talk about how language can affect relationships, how language does implement shared understandings between you, your families, your colleagues, the service, and we are going to use this as an opportunity to build your professional terminology. So here we go. We change our language when we speak with children, and we modify and adapt our language when we speak, either depending on the age of the child, depending on the developmental needs of the child, depending on the culture of the child, depending on a whole range of things. So innately, most of us, in fact, are very, very good at adapting our language as we go to our audience, depending on who that audience is. So I will often speak with, when I speak with children, I speak very differently to what I would speak with colleagues. I speak very differently with children, depending on the age and the developmental stage, and I'm sure that most of you do too. So everything that I've given you today to practice on, now I'm not sure whether you have a professional journal that you can jot in for your own professional practice, but I do strongly recommend that you do maintain a journal and you jot in anything that you need in there, and you go back and you reflect on that, whether that be at the end of the week, end of the month, whatever that is for you. So as far as building our professional practice, this is one strategy that we can use. And particularly being family daycare educators, you are often by yourself, so you don't have that opportunity to build or bounce those conversations off somebody else. Whereas when you're working within a team and you participate in those collegial conversations, it's much easier to build your terminology and to build your language while you're like your professional language, working with others. So this is a really good opportunity for family daycare educators who are working on their own to utilize their journal and ask the following questions and think about the following scenarios that I'm about to give you, just to build on your professional practice. Now, one of the things that I do say all the time is our voice is the loudest in our own head. So when we say this to children all the time, like if you say you can't do it, so you've got a child that may be saying things like, I can't do it, it's too hard. Well, if you keep telling yourself you can't do it, it's too hard, then you're going to eventually believe that, and then it will become too hard. So I want you to take that same concept onto yourself. So listen to the way you speak with families, listen to the way that you speak with colleagues, listen to the way that you speak with your service representatives, and start building your own terminology. So if you hear yourself saying something like, oh, you know, the child today, actually, I spoke with an educator this week who said this, and the educator said, oh, you know, with this particular child that I'm working with, their family doesn't give them proper meals. Well, my first question will be, well, what is proper? And is that a judgment on the family? So they're the kinds of questions that I would ask based on that terminology, whereas the educator may have rephrased that to say that, you know, the family does not provide nutritional meals based on the child's developmental needs or based on the food pyramid or based on whatever. So it's not a judgment just simply based on the educator's assumption. Does that make sense? So let's jump into this. Now I'm going to go through this because this is a very reflective activity and this may take a lot of time to embed. Now, mind you, I will make what's the word I'm after? I've lost a word. All of the information in these 7 slides that I will be giving you today, they are all sourced from the ASEQA knowledge game. So you can access the ASEQA knowledge game off the ASEQA website and you can purchase that knowledge game. So all of these questions or scenarios or whatever I've provided here for each quality area, they are all contained in the ASEQA knowledge game. So when we talk about the educational program and practice, and we talk about that all the time with our colleagues, with our service providers, with our families, these are some of the key words that sort of show your professional understanding, that indicate your professional knowledge, that engage your colleagues into a professional conversation, that send a shared understanding to families, all those kind of things. So when we look at each of the slides, and I'm not sure whether you can see my cursor, I'm pretty sure you can. The key words, I would like for you to think about how you can build those key words into your responses. Now, if you find this challenging to start with, that's fine, that's great, that's all good. But what we want to move to a space where you can find those, where you can build this terminology into your language and your feedback with families and colleagues. One of the strategies that I do use, and I have been a teacher for a number of years, one of the strategies that I do use with adult learners is to make sure, and I do it myself, is to make sure that you have a dictionary handy so that you can define some of these words so that you're not just using those words inappropriately, you're actually putting them in place. So this, again, can take some time. And this, again, for me, just for me personally, and everybody's different, it took me a number of years to really build my professional language over time. And that came from reading, that came from engaging in conversations. So this is not necessarily something that we're all born with. This is a skill that we need to work on, and a skill that we need to practice, and a skill that we need to reflect on. So each of the slides that I'm going to give you will hold keywords. And if you can try and build those keywords into your responses of the scenarios or questions asked in each of the quality areas, and then reflect on that and see how you can improve. So this activity may take months for a long time for you to really feel that you're building those skills. So if you don't have the skills now, Don't feel bad about that. We all start at the start and we all learn how to use our professional jargon. So it is what it is. So quality area 1, we speak with our colleagues and we speak with families, particularly around quality area 1. And these are some of this is a practice scenario, how you can start building, practicing, and embedding that terminology. So how does your program ensure that your daily routines are child-focused and not adult-focused? Now, me being me and sitting where I sit, and as you know, I sit with approved providers and I work with a lot of service providers and committees of management and those sorts of things. And often when I do an assessment on services, we see that the routine is often structured around the educators rather than the children. So we see that, lunchtime is this because that caters for breaks. And there is a necessity in all of everything that we do, and I understand that. But we also see in all service types that children all have to wash their hands at one time, that all children all have to eat morning tea at one time, that all children all have to participate in group time at one time. So let's talk about how our routines are child-focused and not adult-focused. So I want you to have a think about a couple of the routines that you have in place, and then in your responses, make sure that you try and build some of these keywords into your responses so that you can practice your professional jargon. Okay, so children's health and safety. So our keywords in children's health and safety, and I've kept all the colours in line with national standards, so that's why these slides look like that. So our keywords would be in children's health and safety is wellbeing, infection control, risk minimisation, the rights of the child, meaningful experiences. So there's some of the keywords that I would really like to see in your responses. And again, jot these down in your journal and use your dictionary, make sure that you've got a really good understanding of this terminology and how you can apply it. So the scenario in this, or the question would be, how do you meet the needs of children and respect the choices of families who require a sleep or rest throughout the day while simultaneously allowing other children in the program to engage in meaningful experiences? Now, I know I speak with a lot of educators who can find this a challenge. So they've got children that are awake, they've got children that may not sleep through noise, that even though, that you might have a 3-year-old that's awake, but an 11-month-old that needs to be asleep, and how we manage that situation. Families will also have a very big input into children's sleeping patterns and sleeping requirements, and often we deal with the challenge as early childhood educators that families will say things like, don't leave them to sleep, or make sure they wake up after 45 minutes. So that's a common issue that we deal with as educators. So when speaking about that with families, or when speaking about that with your colleagues, what are the kinds of terminology that you can use? Because in many cases, when I speak with educators, you're saying the right things, but you're saying it in a manner that doesn't really show that you've got a professional understanding. It may show that you have an insight to the child. It may show that you've got a commitment to the family. It may show that you've got strategies in place, but it does not indicate your professional knowledge. So that's why when you're working on these responses, if you use these keywords that are straight out of the national quality standards, then that will not only show you or present you more professionally, it will also send the message to families particularly, but families that you do have a professional understanding of why you're doing what you're doing. Okay. Quality area 3, the physical environment. So some of the keywords in this one would be your philosophy about whether that be an indoor-outdoor program, whether that be messy play or sensory play, or whatever that is for you, for your personal philosophy. What is acceptable risk? Now, we know that we have to often nurture families through children, with having acceptable risk and being exposed to acceptable risk, and what that acceptable risk looks like, and what the potential outcomes of acceptable risk looks like, and how we implement our intentional teaching strategies. And you all have it, even though you may not use that terminology, you all have intentional teaching strategies. So it's about really clearly articulating what that is. So the thought provocation here provocation here is the Reggio Emilia philosophy considers the environment to be the child's third teacher. What does this concept mean to you? Now, if you're not aware of Reggio Emilia philosophy, if you're not aware of the environment being the third teacher, then there is plenty of resources out there that you can do a little bit of research and figure out what that means for you and what that, from a sector perspective, what people think about that. So if you're uninformed around this, there's always ways you can do that. If you are informed around this, then what does that concept mean to you about the environment being the third teacher? Now, for me, that means that the environment is set up in a way that is inviting, it is challenging, it meets the child's needs, so that child can use their agency to move throughout that environment to choose what they want to do. It helps them with their self-help skills in the sense that the bathroom is accessible, the hand washing, you might have a stool there, you might have the bathroom accessible so children can just go off. So whatever that is. So the environment is the third teacher. So have a little think about that and utilize your keywords in your responses. And again, jot them down in your journal. Staffing arrangements, keywords, reciprocal and critical reflection. So consider the way feedback is communicated between colleagues in your service. Is this form of communication respectful and effective? Could you change the way in which you personally communicate or the way your team as a whole communicates to be more effective, to more effectively provide feedback to one another? So if we talk about reciprocation and critical reflection, now many of you work in isolation most of the time, but almost all of you come together in some kind of group meeting or group activity or service meeting or whatever that looks like for you as an individual. So consider the way that you do provide feedback to your, pardon me, I'm just going to pour some, I've got water. Consider the way you do provide feedback to the service that you are registered with, what that looks like, what is that collegial approach to being a family daycare educator. How do you connect with your team? How do you provide feedback to the approved provider? How is that feedback taken? Could you be better at providing that feedback? So often, and I've been a manager off and on over the years, and often I used to get people used to tell me things on the run kind of thing. So I would walk through a room and they'd say, oh, don't forget this, or hey, have you thought about it? Or, this is what I want to say. And they would tell me that on the run. So it would eventually all just sort of fill in my head. And then by the end of the day, the week, the month, whatever that is, then I would have to sort of draw that information all out of my head. Whereas sometimes I used to say to my colleagues or to educators, okay, so yep, I need to know that needs to inform something, whether that needs to inform our QIP, or that needs to inform our strategy plan, or that needs to inform HR relations, or whatever that is, whatever they're telling me while I'm just walking through, then sometimes I would need to say to them, you need to provide that in writing, because then I can use that information differently, better. It would have more of an effective outcome. So how do you provide that information, and can you provide that information better? Because sometimes telling people something, whether that be your service coordinator or whether that be your service provider, telling them on the run may not be effective, because humans are humans, and I'm a human also, and sometimes by telling us on the run, that can lead to things getting forgotten, that can lead to a misinterpretation, that can lead to a number of things. So this is what I need you to think about when we talk about that, and remember your keywords as we go. Okay, quality area 5, relationships with children. Albert Bandura, a social behaviourist, believed that educators should be conscious of their own behaviours. They should model, demonstrate, and act in ways that they would like children to behave. Are you conscious of your own behaviours when working with children? And have you considered how children may copy or imitate your behaviour? Share an example. So think about an example of this and jot that in your journal, and then upon reflection, try and build these keywords into your responses as to how you're aware of yourself and your own practice and what you do every day and your own terminology, and how you behave as a professional. And have you considered how this may it may affect children. Now, often with educators, some of it is not always, and I've worked with thousands of educators, some of it is not always necessarily what they say, but often when working with children, it's the it's the physical behavior, it's the body language that we send to children that children are receptive to. So when a child may ask you something, is it like, oh, yes, I'll give you that, but it's that, oh, that sends the bigger message than the words, yes, I'll give you that. So a lot of this relationships with children is around body language, and it is around, sharing your emotions with children, how you present. So have a little think about that as you go. And again, a lot of this is reflective. So this may take weeks or months to really sort of, resonate with you and how you're going to use this information. So quality area 6, collaborative partnerships with families and communities. Our keywords are collaboration, partnership, contribution, advocate, and incorporate. So have you ever heard the term, it takes a village to raise a child, which means if you look at the Bronfenbrenner theory, that even though the child is central, you've got the immediate family, then you've got the extended family, then you've got schools or kindergartens, then you've got the broader society, then you've got the structures around that, which could be policy, governance, all those sorts of things. So the child, even though the child is central, there are a lot of contributors to the child being, to the child's well-being, to the child's safety, to all of that. So it does take a village to raise a child. So this is an African proverb, and it is commonly referred to in the Reggio Emilia philosophy. So write in your journal what that means to you and how you can implement that in your program, and remember those keywords as you go. Quality area 7, governance and leadership. Obviously, keywords are leadership, strategy, and monitoring. Now, I often hear from educators who say things like, well, I'm not in a governance position, I'm not in a leadership position. And I always challenge that in the sense that, yes, you are. You are running your own home business. You are the leader of your home business. You do have to be answerable to the service provider that you're registered with, yes, but it is your business. So we talk a lot about that, and I'll put the business plan template here for you if you do need further information around business planning templates and what that looks like for you. So just pop that in there. So this is the question, the reflection, do you have any effective time management tips or strategies that you can share with, well, this says the group, but your group? So how do you, as a small business owner, make sure that everything gets done throughout the day? How do you lead your business from a time management perspective? Are there particular strategies that you have that you do want to share with your colleagues? Do you have any tips around, I am one of my strategies as far as being a leader and making sure that everything is done is doing it in the moment, even though that moment may be intrusive at the time. If you do it in the moment, then you don't have to come back to it. So a lot of my strategy is making sure that things are actioned immediately, or they're followed up immediately, so that I don't have to come back and reflect on them. There will always be things that I have to come back and reflect on and action and those sorts of things. But if I work as I go, so to speak, and I do the tasks as I go, so to speak, then it's not overwhelming at the end of the day, end of the week, end of the month, those sorts of things. So what are your strategies for making sure that you meet all of your obligations? Okay, so part of one of the principles behind this is to make sure that we're all exceeding the national standards. We don't want to be meeting the national standards, and we definitely don't want to be working towards the national standards. Too much time has passed for that now, and the minimum requirement would be meeting the national standards. So how do we go from meeting the national standards to exceeding the national standards? Now, there's a lot of information there that I could give you, but to exceed the national standards, your practice must be informed by critical reflection. And this is the language that I'm giving you in the sense that when you meet with your colleagues, when you have those monthly meetings, that you do have a shared understanding, you do have a shared language, you are presenting yourself as professionals, you are really unpacking the national standards together, and you are putting your strategies in place, you're putting your improvement processes in place, So that is how you will exceed the national standards. National standards are also shaped by meaningful engagement with families and or the community. So again, it's about using that language, though, that shared terminology, so that number one, you are educating and supporting families to understand what your role is as a family daycare educator, and you are building their knowledge as you go, which would then in turn support you as far as families accepting, accepting our obligations as family daycare educators, families accepting our considerations under the education and care legislation and under the education and care national standards. So a lot of this will also support families knowing why you do what you do as a family daycare educator, what those obligations are, what those improvement strategies are, why you are asking the questions that you are, all those sorts of things. So this terminology and language that you're going to build into your professional practice will actually build relationships with families, they will build relationships with your colleagues, they will build relationships definitely with your service provider, because we know that service providers that are moving up the ratings and assessment scale, so they are moving from working towards to meeting, from meeting to exceeding, this would be an expectation of them. So we're just going to touch on a couple of things that I do hear regularly and how we can turn that into different language. So I hear educators say something like, Abraham is being mean to the other children. Well, being mean to the other children is, really being mean. So being mean is a judgment. So that means that the educator has already made that decision that Abraham is mean. Abraham may be feeling... Abraham may be settling in. Abraham may be feeling constrained by the program. Abraham may be feeling bullied by other children. Abraham might have emerging verbal skills, so may not have the ability to negotiate outcomes with other children. So if you're just making these statements like Abraham is being mean, then you're closing your mind off to really interpreting and finding out what is the motivation with Abraham and what is going on with Abraham. So Abraham's not being mean. Abraham may need support with regulating Abraham's own emotions. Abraham might need to be less challenged in the program. Abraham may need to be more challenged in the program. Abraham may need additional verbal skills. Abraham may need a whole range of things. So by the comments, things like Abraham is being mean to other children, that can be that can close educators' minds off to being further reflective or being really reflective around what it is that Abraham needs. Now, again, it's the same thing. Sandra is not behaving properly. And again, like I said, when I introduced this concept at the beginning of the video, was what is properly and what does that look like? So does properly mean that they're just not following the educator's directions? Is properly mean that they're not age appropriate? Is properly means that what is properly? So being mindful of that language does really set you up to be more accepted professional, does really enhance and build your own professional practice. I hear this one all the time, and I did a video about this last weekend if you didn't watch. I treat children like my own. And I often hear educators go even further than saying that. They're like my kids. I treat them like my kids. As a parent, that is the absolute last thing that I want to hear somebody say to me, that I treat my child like I'm their parent, or I treat my child like their own. Because as a parent, I'm putting my child into an education and care service with the expectation that my child will have an early childhood educational program. Absolutely, I'm putting my child there and I expect them to be safe and I expect them to be cared for and I expect them to be respected and I would love for them to be loved. But that's not what I'm putting them in for. I'm not looking for a substitute parent. I'm looking for somewhere quality for my child to be while I go off and do my work or my study or whatever that is. So be really mindful about when you say things like that, how that potentially can be perceived by parents. Some parents love it. Some parents love that. But other parents, even though they may not say that to you, they'll go and get in their car and go, oh my God, they're taking over from me. So there's a real psychology to families hearing that sort of stuff. So be very mindful about that. The parent is not working today and their child is still in care. I hear this a lot from educators. And at the end of the day, being service providers, and we are providing an education and care service to families. So being providers of an education and care program, it's not our role to sit and judge whether families spend enough time with their children, or why that family needs to work. We don't know the family's financial considerations. We don't know the family's coping mechanisms. We don't know that. So as far as building our empathy towards families, then we don't need to be saying those kinds of things. And if you feel as a family daycare educator a child needs a break from care, which often happens sometimes, they can get overwhelmed, they can get tired, they can get all sorts of things, then that's about your partnership with families. That's about negotiating care arrangements with families. So by saying things, a parent is not working today and yet their child is still in care, that again can be a judgment. Any kind of judgment that you make on a family or as a colleague or as on a child, it can build barriers for yourself for your reflective practice. So just be really mindful of that. And I'm going to finish off today with Amani is a good boy. What is a good boy? Is a good boy a child that listens to your direction, what you want to do? Is it so that's a compliant child? Is that a good boy? I would argue that no, not necessarily. That's not a good boy, in the sense that we want children to challenge. We want children to ask questions. We want children to have their own agency. So what is it that you're really looking for? And so by being aware of and monitoring and upgrading and implementing further professional language, you will find that your messages are a little bit clearer. Your messages aren't exclusive of children. Your messaging is not judgmental of families. Your messaging and your terminology leaves it open so that you can better reflect as you go. So yeah, just be really mindful of that. So hopefully over the next couple of weeks, you will monitor yourself and see how you go. Jot it down in your journal. Listen to yourself when you speak with families, colleagues, and service providers. Use a dictionary, as I said. Define words. I still define words to this day, and my dictionary is always just there. And I often refer to my dictionary. You can access a dictionary online. Me, I prefer the old school way. And make sure that you maintain your professional journal and build those skills. Now, particularly if you are looking towards stepping away from your family, from being a family daycare educator, possibly into a leadership role, then this would actually be an expectation moving into a leadership space, that you have the skills and abilities to use that shared professional language to build knowledge, skills, abilities, and relationships with families and colleagues. So good luck with your professional learning and your professional development. If you have anything, you can always jump onto the JPS Advisors website. I've popped a link down here below, and you can get in touch that way. You can send an email and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Otherwise, I will see you here next week for another free training. Now, the training does come based on the week generally, so we're not sure. We don't have next trainings planned, but we will. It is definitely based on the week ahead, so what that looks like. So this is what this week brought. So enjoy your week, everybody, and I will see you here next Saturday for another training. Make sure you sign up to the newsletters. The newsletters have loads of information, ways to get in touch, all those sorts of things. So if you haven't signed up for the newsletters, make sure you do. And by signing up to the newsletters, you will also be able to hear what I'm saying to approved providers, because the newsletter is targeted towards management and leadership. So it will give you a good idea of the expectations of management and leadership from a standard and legislative perspective. So, yep, great to see you. Have a great day. See ya. Bye.